Hey guys, welcome to the Titanium Vault. I'm your host, RJ Bates III, and today I'm sitting down for the second time with the Mr. Legendary Brad Chandler. How you doing, man?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me, RJ.
Absolutely. It's an honor after 5 years to have you back on the Titanium Vault for the second time. I know we have a lot to talk about, but before we jump into the new thing that you're doing, I want to just touch base on the real estate side of things. You said how many deals did y'all do last year?
253.
So when I say legendary wholesaler, I mean it. And you're not just wholesaling. You said you're doing fix and flips and all kinds of stuff. So give a brief rundown. What is it that Express Home Buyers is doing nowadays?
Yeah, fix and flips, novations, wholesale deals. We're primarily operating in DC Metro, Baltimore Metro, and believe it or not, Los Angeles. Now we
Oh,
had
wow.
a home buying specialist move out there, and we're like, well, let's spend some marketing dollars. So we've come across quite a few deals, and we do a handful of deals across the country through our SEO, but primarily 98% of those 253 deals came from those three metro markets.
So this is hilarious. I just did a podcast myself where I was the guest, and someone asked me about what market they should be in. And I literally used Los Angeles as an example. I said, like, I've done over 250 podcasts. I've never had someone say, hey, we're killing it in LA. So if you're in LA, you better look in the Midwest or the Sunbelt states. And here you come in saying, well, we're doing some deals out there. That's awesome. So when I had you on 5 years ago, you guys were crushing it with virtual assistants. Is that still like a main cog of the wheel there?
Main cog may be an overstatement. I think we still have 11 or 12 full-time virtual assistants that help support our salespeople and our operations.
Nice. And you talked about novations. How long has that been going on? Because I know that's the sexy thing over the past couple of years. How long have you guys been doing novations, and how often are you guys doing that in comparison to just wholesaling?
So my friend Eric Brewer was the pioneer of novations,
Yep.
and I lose track of time. But it had to be at least, let's see, we're in 2023. It was either 2018, 2019, 2020. He came down and spent a day with my team. So
Yep.
we've been doing them now for probably 4 years. And it's probably of the 25 deals we do a month, we probably novate 3 to 5 of them.
Nice. Yeah, Eric is a good friend of mine, obviously from Pardon the Disruption. He's a genius at what he does. I just got done doing a 50-day challenge where I went live every single day, and people were giving me a hard time because when I got a novation, I was just turning it over to Eric's team. I mean, I was just like, hey, why, if I have this connection to like the guy that does novations, why am I going to try to figure them out myself? I'll just joint venture with Eric and let him take the wheel from there. So love,
Smart.
love to hear that. So when you and I were talking about, hey, let's do a second podcast 5 years after the first one, the main reason why I wanted to bring you on here is because obviously you're a legend in the real estate investing world, but you have had a massive change in your life. And something happened a couple of years ago. I don't know what it is. So I'm excited to hear, but there was a massive change in your life. So talk about that and where it led to your new direction now.
Yeah. So, gosh, 2.5 years ago, a little more than 2.5 years ago, I was attempting to get my son help for anxiety. And in the course of doing that, I realized that I had some issues from childhood that I never dealt with, that I didn't even know that I had, which is what most of us face as well. We have these deep seated subconscious beliefs that were formed through childhood stress and programming. And so I was offered an opportunity to come meet with someone and do some intensive work, and I took him up on that, and I did it. And in a 3-hour session, RJ, my life completely changed. And I came home from that session in Park City, a completely different human being. I looked around and I was like, wow, I think I just found the secret to life and to happiness. And I thought about all the people in my life that I knew that were struggling mightily from weight issues to divorce to addiction to depression, anxiety, OCD. And I was like, this is the reason. This is the reason. And this is every single problem you have in your life comes down to a thinking problem. None of us were born with thinking problems. We developed those thinking problems to cope with our unmet needs or childhood stress. So once I figured that out, I was like, gosh, I've got to give this gift back. I mean, everything in my life has changed. I no longer take things personally. I don't talk negatively to myself. I'm in a fantastic relationship. I'd never been in a fantastic relationship before. My health has never been better. Express Home Buyers did 253 deals last year, and I currently work an hour a week. When I stopped focusing on trying to prove myself in my business and I shifted to making an impact, everything changed. So that's what I'm doing now is I'm helping people understand that they weren't put in this world to suffer. They were put here for a massive mission. And once you do the work and you clear out that childhood programming, the sky's the limit for you.
So in 2017, when I started the podcast, I wanted to give back to the real estate investing community. But very quickly, what I learned is being a podcast host is a free way to essentially get to know people that you respect in this industry. And I remember 5 years ago, I talked to you about this before the interview, where you made such an impact on me with our first interview, where you blew my mind. And it was all about real estate. It was all about what you were doing with your wholesale business. But I have to tell you, you came across as a very direct and almost stressed out human being. Not in a bad way. It was just, hey, RJ, my name's Brad. I'm going to do this podcast, and I've carved out X amount of time to do this podcast, and it was just very matter directive, to the point. Today, we sit down, we spend probably 10, 15 minutes just talking. You seem so much more relaxed. Your content on social media, me and you, we've been friends on social media, but we've never met in person. I wouldn't say we're friends or anything like that, but I see the difference in just your post where you don't talk about real estate. You talk about happiness. You talk about living your life. Talk about the impact that this makes for entrepreneurs, what you're doing, because I think the pool of entrepreneurs is probably the biggest pool of clients you have, where we struggle with all of the things that you're trying to fix. Is that kind of the target audience that you're going after, is like, hey, these entrepreneurs that don't even know that they're necessarily dealing with these issues?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. So that's why I started my podcast, How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs, is because I connect with entrepreneurs. I was one, and you said I was stressed out. Well, I was stressed out. When you unknowingly have childhood programming that's affecting your life, you are in a constant state of fight or flight. When you have negative emotions, that's your body going into fight or flight. So I spent most of my life in a fight or flight state. People see me now and they're like, Brad, you look different. Your skin looks different. You talk differently. You're slower. Like everything about you has changed. And you know why? It's because I killed that proverbial lion that was chasing me. When you've got that lion chasing you and you're in fight or flight, how can you run a business? How can you figure out your life's purpose? As soon as you kill that proverbial lion, you can actually take a couple deep breaths and look around and be like, why was I put here? And it only took me a couple of weeks to figure out why I was put here. So why I don't talk about real estate anymore is because the only reason that I got into real estate, looking back, is because I felt unworthy. And I thought, if I can make a bunch of money, I'm going to be worthy. People will think I'm good and I'll be happy. And that's why when we talked 5 years ago, my tagline was Brad Chandler coaching you to freedom. It still is coaching you to freedom. But back then I thought you got freedom through money. You don't get freedom through money. Ask all the famous singers and actors who have taken their own lives with drug abuse. They had all the money in the world. Prince, Amy Winehouse, just the list goes on and on. Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
They had all the money in the world. Money does not buy you happiness. It does not buy you freedom. So back to your original question, RJ, I believe that entrepreneurs get into business to have control because they lack control as a child. And when you're in a bunch of stress, you don't have control. And I also believe that a lot of them get into business like I did, thinking that if they make a lot of money, that's going to bring them happiness. So many of them don't understand that they have these deeply subconscious thoughts. A lot of the people I work with work, work, work. That's their addiction. And it's such an addiction that it hurts their family, their business, their personal relationships. and they don't even know why. And a lot of them, when I talk to them, well, my dad did the same thing or my mom did the same thing, and we unknowingly pass this trauma, this programming down to our children. So yeah, that's my mission in life, is to help a million people end their suffering, whatever it is, and find the freedom and happiness that you deserve. We all deserve it.
Right. So you talk about entrepreneurs get into business so they can have control. Okay. Talk to me about why are so many entrepreneurs that find success comparing themselves to other entrepreneurs and trying to beat them? Like there's this game of like, do you know how many times I've heard people say, but Pace Morby, but Jamil Damji, but Steve Trang, like these names that are, have these social media followings. And it's like, but you might have a better lifestyle for what you want. And they forget about that and they want to go have the Pace Morby lifestyle. When in fact, they don't even know what Pace Morby's lifestyle is. They just see on social media. Do you think, where does that come from?
Yeah, it comes from when you don't. So all of us to some degree have this I am not enough. Some people have it a little bit and they function great and they have good relationships. Some people have it badly and they're addicts, or they work 100 hours a week or 80 hours a week. So when you don't feel enough, you feel inadequate, and you're always trying to this was me for 47 years. I would go to these masterminds and I would talk about, I'd come home and tell my wife at the time, like, Jamil or whoever, like, I can't believe how is Mike amassed such a fortune in real estate? Like, I'm just an idiot.
Right.
So it's a constant fight for more, and that's the same reason that people work so much. When you feel inferior, you need more. When you don't feel enough, you need more, more, more. Whether it's work, sex, drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, whatever it is. So that's the answer right there. It's you don't know someone could be making $1 million a month, but they could also be contemplating suicide. You don't know that by social media posts. So,
Absolutely.
so the best thing you can do is stop focusing on other people and compare yourself to yourself yesterday. Did I do a little bit better? Did I treat my spouse or my child with love? Did I respond in love instead of fear and ego? Did I read a book? Did I read a couple pages in a book? Did I go exercise? Did I eat a little better? That's all you have to do, is just get a little bit better each day and stop comparing yourself to others. But easier said than done. You're not going to do this until you can go do a deep dive and figure out, what are these subconscious thoughts that are ruling me? Because when you go to a job that you don't like and you work 10 hours and you come home and you fight with the spouse and you yell at the dog and you drink 3 glasses of wine, people have no idea why they're doing these things. It's not conscious. Your subconscious mind controls 95% of your daily behavior. Until you figure out what's causing you to do that, nothing will ever change.
So you talk about don't respond in fear and ego. I want to dive into that a little bit more, because I think just being around a ton of entrepreneurs over the past 13 years, that is a huge problem, both with their spouse, mainly with the people that are closest to them in their lives, right? You're usually pretty good with like the lowest man on the totem pole, like the virtual assistant. Like you'll treat the virtual assistant with the most respect. But then like your partner or your spouse, you respond with this fear and ego. Where is that coming from? Are you just saying it's something from your childhood, or does it have something to do with what you're in the moment dealing with?
No, it's never about the moment. It's never about the moment. The argument that you have with your spouse, RJ, is never about the actual argument. It's always your brain going back to a painful time in your childhood and bringing in a meaning when someone made you feel a certain way that's similar to the argument at hand. So almost every action in life by humans is a call for love. They're hurt and they want your love, or it's a show for love. When someone's cutting you off and flicking you off, that's a call for love. When someone comes and puts their arm around you, gives you a kiss, your wife, and says, I love you, RJ, that is a show of love. You as a human being get to respond in one or two ways. You get to respond in love or fear and ego. The more that you respond to love to yourself and to others, the more free and the joyer and the happier you're going to be. Why do we respond in fear and ego? It goes back to the fight or flight. When you haven't figured out these unknowingly unconscious thoughts that are in your body, you are in a fight or flight. So you're constantly scanning the savannah for that lion. So most of us operate 75% of our time in a fight or flight. So you're always looking for fear and danger. So that's why you respond in fear and ego.
Love it. I have a question. This is kind of a somewhat personal question. And this would go to, if I were your client, here is the problem. I am a master at arguing with logic. Okay. So in that scenario right there where you say it's never about the moment, I can almost 100% of the time make an argument where no, it had nothing to do with the past. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with specifically what just happened in the moment as to why I reacted negatively or with fear and ego. How do you overcome that with a potential client like myself, where it's, hey, I can almost always come back, not with an emotional response, but with a logical response as to why I did what I did?
Yeah. Wow. You asked. I mean, this is a deep question, right? So number one, we have to have an awareness to change. And so I created this tool that takes 2.5, 3 minutes. It's a 12-question self-love quiz. It's going to tell you your level of self-love, which is kind of your self-esteem. So if you take the self-love quiz and you come back with lack of self-love or mild self-love, there's a chance that you have a need to be right. You feel inferior, and therefore you've got to show your importance by being right. So that would be one case to your question, an answer to your question on why do I have to argue something that's logic. But I can tell you for certainty that we're emotional human beings, and that emotion always, 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 always outrules and overtakes logic. That's why we fight for shopping carts. That's why there's road rage. So for you to say, I can logically say it was something that happened in the present, you can give me an example right now. We'll go through it. I'll prove to you every time that it has nothing to do with the actual situation, because all you have to do is ask yourself, is there another human being in this world that could be in my situation now and not be upset? And the answer is always going to be yes. So why are you upset? You're upset because of your programming from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever, how many years ago.
Okay, so I'm gonna open myself up here. I'm gonna give you an example. I will say, first and foremost, I took your quiz. Go to bradchandlercoaching.com. It's right there. Take the quiz. I took it, and the results came back. I have lack of self-love. Not a surprising result. I'm going to be honest with you. It was not a surprising result. As I was answering the quiz, I was like, I'm pretty sure I know I'm going to be on the spectrum here of not good results based off the answers I was giving, but I was being honest. Okay. Now, here's the example I'm going to give you. Cassie, my business partner, she had a disagreement with someone that we were doing a deal with. I ended up getting on the phone with that person, resolving it. They were very negative towards how Cassie handled the situation. This is very rare, but it happens in business. Essentially, they were like, hey, I don't like Cassie, and I don't like how she handled that. So I went out into the office in front of our entire team, and I didn't think I was doing anything bad, but I asked Cassie, hey, what happened in that conversation? This realtor's very upset. And Cassie essentially sent me a text message and said, hey, in the future, if you have a problem with how I handle the situation, can we please just not do that in front of the team? I didn't think that was fair. Okay. Fast forward a couple of days, the situation gets reversed. Okay. She is coming to me to ask me about how I handle the situation. And I said, hey, hold yourself to the same standard that you're going to hold me to. That led to us getting in a fight, very rare as business partners, but we got into a fight. And essentially, I was like, hey, you need to hold yourself to the same standard that you hold me to. And I probably didn't handle it the right way. I got, loud. I'm a naturally loud person. And that led to a disagreement between us. So in that scenario, my logic says I felt like I was just repeating what she said. Like, hey, there was a standard there that we set as business partners, and I felt like you crossed it, but it was the standard that you set. That's me logically saying it's okay how I handled it. So that's my example.
All right, so a lot to unpack here. So the quiz you can actually find at bradchandler.com/quiz. So go take it now and see what you come up with. Let's go back to the realtor who was upset. The realtor is upset with Cassidy
Mhm.
because there's something in their past that that whatever she did made them feel. So that's how this whole domino thing started. And then Cassidy, you come out and say something to her. She takes it personally and says, please don't do that in front of me. Well, other people. Well, why would she care? Because she didn't want other people to judge her, likely. Why would someone not want someone to judge them? Because if you felt 100% enough and worthy, I don't care that people judge me anymore, because now I know that if people judge me, it has nothing to do with Brad and has all to do with how they feel about themselves. Roles reversed. If you're judging someone, it has something to do with you internally that you haven't fixed. So she feels bad that you put her in a position to be judged, or you judged her. So she says something to you. You internalize it and you probably say okay, but there's probably a part of you that's wounded because you're like, she's correcting me. You're just a 6-year-old boy sitting in this adult body, and so is she, and so is the realtor. We got our business suits on, but we're all just 6-year-old boys or
Yep.
girls. So now she comes and does the same thing to you. So you have a need to be right to prove to her, well, hey, if you tell me this, then you got to live up to it. But is that really how the universe works? Like, is that how nature works? Does a lion who has something come steal its dinner for the night? Does he 3 days later, is he still pissed? No. So you carry that forward because, again, you're this hurt little 6-year-old boy that are just bringing in these meanings from the past instead of just seeing it for what it is. If you had extreme self love, let's go back how the situation would have played out differently. When she came to you, you would have said to yourself, you know what? She's hurt. I know she's coming from the past. So I don't really care if she says this in front of other people. She may not be able to handle it because she's hurt, but I'm not hurt, so I can handle it. So it's no big deal to me. And actually, maybe it's going to be a learning exercise for my entire staff. So let's have this. Just see situations as they are rather than the way you want them to be. So you wanted it to be a certain way to please you when it could have been a great learning opportunity for your whole staff. Both of those situations could have been a great learning opportunity. But what did both of you do? And the realtor, you went back just what your brain should do, and you brought stuff into the current. It's not your fault. It's not her fault. It's not the realtor's fault. This is how our brains work. But with awareness, everything can change.
I love that. And you're right. You're absolutely right, because in my mind, like I said, this is why I wanted to ask this. I could argue that it's logic, but in reality, there was pain there from
Yes.
how she spoke to me, and then I found an opportunity to express my pain.
Yes. Yes. And let me say something about yourself, your self-love quiz results. I don't know how you reacted from seeing that you had lack of self-love. You said, "Oh, I know it." I need to tell you that knowing that you have lack of self-love, every single area of your life is negatively impacted. So don't look at it as woe is me, this sucks. Knowing that you have lack of self-love, I have taken countless clients in 5 weeks from lack of self-love to extreme self-love. Your life, RJ, can so profoundly change. I don't even think you understand how great your relationships, both personally and professionally, your health can change, your relationship with your kids, everything can change when you become aware of that behavior that's driving, the beliefs that are driving the behavior that you want to change.
I love that. Now, dive into that though. We haven't really defined what is self-love. Like, if I were to say, hey, I have extreme self-love for myself, it's almost kind of weird. We don't say that in society, really. In fact, with all of the people that I follow on social media, you're the only person that I hear speak about it. So define what would be self-love.
Yeah. So I'm going to define self love by results. So, are you in a deeply connected relationship with someone you feel safe with? If you are, and that's never been an issue in your life, you likely have self love. If you've struggled with relationships your whole life, you probably lack self love. Do you talk negatively to yourself? If you never do, you probably have self-love. If you treat yourself like your best friend, you probably have self-love. If you're calling yourself fat and ugly and dumb all the time, you probably lack self-love. Do you take things personally all the time? If you do, you probably lack self-love. If you can take criticism and nothing ever bothers you, you probably have a lot of self-love. Are you addicted to anything? If you have an addiction to anything, I can promise you, you don't have self-love, whether it's work, alcohol, sex, because you're trying to escape your current state. Do you have self-destructive behaviors? Do you drink too much, eat too much, have risky sex, hurt yourself? Those are all signs of lack of self-love. So those are some results you can look at in your life. Are you constantly triggered? You don't have self-love. What is self-love? It's just loving yourself unconditionally for who you are, who you were born for. We were all born at our essence, like our essence is absolutely perfect. It's pure love. Through these childhood programming and stress, we have to put up these filters and coping mechanisms. So extreme self-love is just loving yourself unconditionally and knowing that you are a great human being, because you are.
How do you identify some of those things? Because some of those things, it's really hard for people to like identify that they're doing it. For example, negative talk to yourself. How do you know that? Because sometimes, let's be honest, we're not actually talking to ourselves. We're not in the car and like, RJ, you're fat, man. You should go to the gym. Like, we don't say that. It's kind of like a passing thought that we always have thoughts going through our mind, right? And it's like, man, I'm really worried about going to family mastermind because I know I probably should have lost 20 pounds and I haven't done it. Like, that's a thought that I've had in the past month, right? Lack of self-love, right? Negative, but it's hard to also catch yourself doing it. So what about that aspect of it where maybe people say, no, I don't talk negatively to myself, but they actually are?
Yeah, so that's one of the things, RJ, that people are pretty good at identifying whether you say it out loud. And I have clients that say it out loud. I mean, I used to tell my wife, I'd come home and I'd be like, "Hey, I'm so dumb." So there was negative stuff. That's one of the things that's not hidden. You either know you treat yourself well, or you don't. So what I've created this. We're gonna rename it. We've been calling it for a year and a half, the daily emotional tracker. We're going to rename it the joy regenerator, because it literally regenerates joy. Where anytime you feel a negative emotion or you get a negative self-talk, I have a pattern interrupt, because here's what typically happens. You have a thought. So I'm fat, that creates an emotion. I'm sad that I'm fat. And then that emotion or feeling creates a behavior and action. Okay, so now I'm going to go eat a bunch of donuts because I feel sad and I want to feel better. And then after you eat the donuts, it reinforces the original thought that I'm fat. So every single thought, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, every problem you have in your life is a thinking problem. So we got to figure out, what is that thought? And that thought, if you're suffering, is always, always, always untrue, right? And it's usually around, I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve love, I'm not enough. So instead of going down that vicious cycle, we break it. So what I do is I have you take a couple deep breaths, so you're present, because when you're in fight or flight, you're always in the past. So I get you present, and then you identify the emotion. What am I feeling? I'm feeling sad. You say to yourself, it's okay you're feeling sad, RJ, because guess what? That's the 6-year-old boy inside yourself, not the 38-year adult you are. Then you come up with 3 grateful things. I'm grateful I have food. I'm grateful I have a house. I'm grateful I have a wife. And then you figure out, where did it come from? Oh, yeah. When my dad didn't show up to the soccer game, I felt sad and I didn't feel unloved. So, what was the original thought that triggered this sadness? I'm not enough. Am I not enough? No, I'm enough. Boom, I can go right back to joy. And if you guys want that, you can have it for free. Just go to bradchandler.com/tracker and grab it. That one thing, if you start doing that, can change your relationships with your spouse, your intimate partner, your kids, because you break the cycle. It's a brain hack. When you say, I am feeling, it forces your amygdala, your fight or flight brain, to think, which forces you to your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain. So it immediately snaps you out of fight or flight just by saying, I am feeling this emotion.
What's hilarious is as I was taking the quiz, the test, some of the questions compounded on themselves. And for example, let's just use this one where I look at myself and I say I'm overweight. And why did I immediately go to but I'm going to Family Mastermind and I'm worried about it because I am concerned about what other people, I'm worried about. I'm going to meet Brad Chandler for the first time at Family Mastermind. And I don't want Brad's first thought when he sees me to be like, man, RJ's, he's a lot bigger than I thought he was. And I'm worried about that. When I really think about it, the amount of lack of self-love that I have just in those thoughts, where instead of just being like, dude, I should just want to be the right weight and healthy for myself. Why am I even thinking about how in the world did I look in the mirror and think about Brad Chandler's thought of me? Like, that's where I think I fall into like extreme lack of self-love because that's where I go. And I think a lot of that comes from being an entrepreneur. Like being an entrepreneur, wanting to compete, trying to always be better than other entrepreneurs. And again, it came from my childhood, right? I watched my parents be entrepreneurs, so I wanted to be one, and I essentially took what I thought they did as entrepreneurs and said that's what I'm supposed to do. Is that kind of a common trait that you see with entrepreneurs right there?
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with being an entrepreneur.
Okay.
It has all to do with your childhood programming. And I want to give you credit for being vulnerable. I mean, I think it's amazing the fact that you can share that you're not happy with your weight. So I love you for that. I can tell you that I used to be that person that would have judged you for being overweight.
Right.
And you've got to understand, everyone else has to understand that when someone judges you, it's their issue. So I would have said, well, what's wrong with him? Like he's why can't what he must be lazy.
Right.
Because he could go to the gym and he could eat right. That was my for 47 years because that was operating from fear and ego because I didn't feel good about myself. Now I would look at someone like you instead of judging them. I would say there is a reason that he has an issue with his weight and it's not his fault. And I can help him. I want to help him because we often use food. When you're 6 years old and something stressful is happening to you, you can't jump in the car and go to the bar and have a couple beers. But what can you do? You can go to the refrigerator and eat food. So many of my clients and people that I know use food as a coping mechanism because for temporarily, just like any other addiction, it makes them feel better. So I would, it's you're starting to have an awareness now. Your awareness is that I'm overweight. I don't want to do it for myself. I'm worried about what Brad Chandler will think of me. That's because you lack worthiness, right? If you felt a lot of self-love, you wouldn't care what I thought because it's about you. So, yeah, some deep stuff. And again, I appreciate your vulnerability, but when you create when you find the self-love that's inside of you, the eating, the exercising, the relationships, they all become easier because you don't have this voice inside yourself saying you're a worthless fat ass. And then
Right.
it creates sadness and then it just exacerbates the problem.
Well, part of the reason why I have no problem sharing and being open is because I've been saying this for 6 years now. I want to give back both on the good and the bad. You watch my YouTube channel, it's me on the phone with sellers. Sometimes they tell me to fuck off and die, and sometimes I get a contract. I mean, you can learn from both of those. And in this case, this is clearly a very unique interview for the Titanium Vault. I mean, but I think it's important for people to realize, like, hey, if I'm sitting here, you listen to me for a reason. If I'm sitting here and saying, hey, this is an area in which I want to improve my life, and I'm aware of it, and I've been aware of it for a while. But one of the things, Brad, is people don't know that there's something out there like your coaching program to help you. Case in point, you didn't know.
I didn't know. and I didn't even know I had a problem. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Two marriages that didn't work out. It wasn't my fault. I picked the wrong one.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, I know that's not the case. I picked the exact one that I wanted, right? So yeah, number one, I didn't know I had a problem. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't have a problem, just go take the quiz. It will take you 3 minutes. If you lack self-love, you have a problem and everything can change. Secondly, is okay, now I have a problem. What do I do? I want to go to therapy. Okay, guess what? I went to therapy for decades, 30 years on and off. I went to 50 different marriage counseling sessions. I had no idea that there was something that within 3 to 5 hours could completely change my life. And what is that? There's three critical components to permanently changing any mental state. You've got to have awareness. What are the thoughts and the beliefs that are driving your behavior? I happen to use hypnosis because hypnosis taps into the subconscious mind that knows the source of all of your problems. And hypnosis isn't what you think. You're not going to be asleep, drooling on yourself, chasing a mouse around a stage. It's just a deeply relaxed state. You've got to have awareness. All change begins with awareness. That's number one. Number two is you got to rewire. So I create a recording that you listen to as you're going to sleep at night when your brain's in an alpha wave brain state where you're most suggestible. You then reprogram that I'm not enough to I am enough. That's step number two. Step number three is now that you know the cause and you're rewiring your brain, you've got to condition it. It's like me giving you a health and fitness plan and then you be like, okay, I'll just sit at home and watch TV. No. You got to go to the gym and do it. So every day you use the joy regenerator, the daily emotional tracker. You show up on weekly calls so you don't go back to that proverbial invisible prison that we've lived in. So yeah, it's one, you've got to have awareness and you just have to look at your results or take the self-love quiz. And number two is once you have that, you've got to have somewhere to go, right? You can go to therapy, but therapy focuses on your conscious thinking, which is only responsible for 5% of your behavior. And it focuses on the symptoms. To solve a mental or a physical pain or problem, you've got to go back to the source. And that's what we do. We go back to the source.
And I would say, first and foremost, you said that the test takes 2 to 3 minutes. If you've listened this far, probably means you need to take the test, right? And you probably need a little bit of support there. I would say slow down and make the test take 5 to 6 minutes. Really sit down and think about how you respond to certain scenarios, because there was moments where I wanted to be like, sometimes, and then it was like, no, I'm pretty far on the negative side here. Like I do that often. But I didn't want to. Subconsciously, I just wanted to say, no, I'm okay. I don't do that. And then when I really thought about it, it's like, no, if I look back 20 years from now, do I still want to be the person I am today? And the answer was no, I don't want to be who I am today. I want to be better. And in order to do that, we have to come to some grips on who we are today. And I think sometimes we just lie to ourselves and say, no, I don't judge other people. Yes, you do. I judged you. I'll never forget the first time you started posting about this. I was like, oh, damn, man, I liked Brad. He went off the fucking deep end. Like, he must be getting high every day, and he's just out there now. Like, what happened to real estate? Now he's just talking about love and joy and happiness. And it's like, this dude's either just on some good weed or he's just on shrooms every day. Like, that's what I was thinking.
That's hilarious.
But then all of a sudden, like you said, man, you look better. You're smiling all the time. And that's not who Brad Chandler was 5 years ago.
Unless I was high and then I was smiling all the time.
Right. But you weren't. So it's like there's been a major shift. And so I have to say kudos to you, man. Because not only are you talking about you don't really care about what other people say about you, because you look at it now and you say, well, that's because there must be something wrong with them. You really lived that, because I'm sure there had to be like people that reached out to you in your life. I'm like, Brad, are you okay?
Oh, yeah. I had a close friend tell me that I was a narcissist. And I was like, why do you? He's like, you're talking about all this self-love stuff. What happened to you? Did you go through a major traumatic event? And I was like, no, I'm just healing myself. Yeah. For 47 years, I told myself that I didn't care what other people thought. And I really did. And the proof is now when I come on and I do videos where, I'm vulnerable to the point of telling. I did a video one time a year ago where I said, my second wife, I used to ask her all the time, can you tell me I'm handsome? Can you tell me I'm sexier more? Because nothing was enough for me. Just like I said earlier, I needed more. I couldn't have said that 3 years ago. It would have like broken me. Like And now I'll tell you anything. Yeah, I used to smoke weed every day. Yeah, I used to drink to feel comfortable because that was me. I was a hurt human being. I was a little 6-year old hurt boy. And
Yep.
you can judge me all you want, but I know if you're judging me, it has nothing to do with me. So I'll tell you anything and everything because it is who I am. And let me tell you, that's true freedom. When you can be your authentic self, you can get up on stage and not worry about what people think of you. That is true freedom that money, sex, religion, nothing can buy.
Absolutely. So I want to touch base on one more thing before we wrap up here. And I'm curious about this because what I've noticed is that there's always trends in business, and it's basically around social media, books, and podcasts can make things extremely popular. And one of the things that over the past several years that has been openly talked about in the entrepreneurial world has been the predictive index test. And so Gary Harper, both of our friends, right? He had me take that, and I ended up being a venturer, and I found out some things about myself through that. And one of those things, which I've always been aware of, this is I struggle celebrating victories. It's always I'm on to the next. Is this something that your program could help with? Because I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, which is we set a goal for ourselves. So, good example. I've won back-to-back closers Olympics. Okay, these competitions where the best closers supposedly we go and we compete, and I've won 2 in a row. I will tell you, the moment that the lights have gone off and the camera turned off, there was not a whole lot of smiling on my side. It was an expectation that I had for myself that I would win, and it was on to the next. What can I do next? What's bigger than winning the Closers Olympics? Is this something that your program can help with? And also, just if you have some thoughts about what I just said, if there's something that causes that, I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, so my program helps people, end their suffering and go from lack of self-love to extreme self-love. Remember earlier when we talked about how when you don't feel enough, nothing is ever enough?
Right.
So let's use income for an example. You could set an income goal to make $1 million this year. You could make $1 million this year. You're not going to feel any differently. You're still going to feel you're not enough. So next year you'll say, okay, let me make 2 million. And
Yep.
then you go and you work twice as hard and your relationship suffers and your kids have behavioral problems. Now you've just made $2 million. You don't feel any differently. So that's why you and so many other people will set a goal, they'll hit the goal, but nothing changes because it's not about the goal. It's about how you feel internally. And it doesn't matter what level you get to, nothing will ever be good enough. Who is telling me? I was on a podcast 2 days ago where the guy has a billionaire friends. They literally have, or at least hundreds of millions of dollars, and they wanted to be a TikTok, an Instagram influencer now. And we were kind of chuckling about it because it's just another thing. Like then they're going to do that, and then they're going to get 1 million followers, and they're going to be like, wait, this isn't enough. So yeah, everything changes with self love. So my program helps you develop self love and live in the truth that you are enough, and then you don't have to. And people might be thinking, well, then I'll lose my drive and I won't do anything. No, it's just the different. It's just the opposite. So many people get into business because they want to make a bunch of money to feel a certain way. I teach you how to feel that certain way without the money. And then once you feel that way, you're going to have a much greater likelihood of getting the money because you're not going to be doing things to prove your worth. You're going to be doing things to make an impact. And let me just tell you a little bit more about that. I never could go and sit on a beach and read 8 hours worth of real estate books. I can now go to a beach for a month if I carved out the time, and I could literally sit under an umbrella for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, and read books on psychology and self love and how the brain works, and never ever get tired of it. Do you think that when we're talking in 5 years, that I might come back on the show in 5 years? Hopefully, it won't be 5 years, and tell you the financial success I've had with this business. Why? Because I have so much purpose around helping people. It's not about making money. And when you focus on making an impact and not about money to prove your worth, you're going to make more money than you ever thought possible.
Yep. And I will say this, the growth that both you and I have had over 5 years, right? First interview 5 years ago, I said before, Your interview blew me away. I remember walking out of the room and I walked to Cassie and I said, I just talked to a legend. I mean, that was unbelievable. He blew my mind with what you were talking about on the real estate side of things. Today, 5 years later, I don't even want to talk to you about real estate. You know what I'm saying? Like this right here is so much more important about where our legacy is when we're gone. The person that we were. Who cares? 253 deals. I mean, you've done that over and over and over again. Nobody cares. You know what I'm saying? Like, first wife didn't care. Second wife didn't care. I know your son probably doesn't care. Same thing. Like, my kid asks me every now and then, like, hey, did you sell any deals today? Yeah. He's only asking me that because he thinks it's important to me. That's it. He doesn't actually care about that. And this is why I'm so glad you decided to come on here for a second time to talk about this, because you're truly making a difference for people now. And we use that loosely with real estate. You know, we make a difference for people, but you're actually making a difference for people now.
Thank you. That's very kind. And you brought up kids, so I'd be remiss without saying this. If you have kids, they didn't ask to be brought into this world. You brought them into the world, and you deserve to give them the greatest gift you can ever give them. And that's to break this multi-generational curse we're in, where we're just passing down the hurt that our parents gave to us. And how do you do that? How do you break this multi-generational curse? You teach their kids how to love themselves unconditionally. How can you teach your child how to love themselves unconditionally if you lack self-love? You can't. But there's no reason to lack self-love, because all we are at the end of the day is love. So all we do is we go and we take those filters off your heart that were put on there, decades ago. And if your kids have behavioral problems and you want to know why, grab your spouse and go to the bathroom and look in the mirror. Your kids have behavioral problems most likely because of yourself. Is that your fault? Is it to blame? No, it's not your fault. But once you gain awareness, you can't hide behind that anymore. So if you're on the fence and you're like, I don't know if I should take the self-love quiz. If you have kids, take the self-love quiz. And if you score lack of or mild self-love, I promise you, as great of a parent as you think you might be, you're negatively affecting them, because you can't give them what they ultimately need. And that's that extreme self-love and how to love themselves unconditionally.
I love it, man. For the people that want to learn more about your program, I know you've dropped a couple of links. Is it just to go to the website? That's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, bradchandler.com. I put out a daily message on this. If you go to the contact button on there, bradchandler.com/contact. I'm on every social media platform, so you can connect with me and help me. I need members of my tribe, honestly, because I want to reach 1 million people. So what's happening is I'm helping people change their lives, and other people are stepping into helping others now, because they're like, wow, just like what happened to me, my life has been so profoundly changed. I've got to give this gift to others. So please help if you're so inclined.
I love it, man. I appreciate your time today. Last question I'll ask you is, I know you said you want to help 1 million people, but way back when I started the podcast, I didn't know how to interview people. And so I was so nervous. I came up with the script in my head of what is it that you do? How do you do it? And why do you do it? And where do you want to be in 5 years? So I want to ask you, with where you are mentally, where do you want to be 5 years from now?
I'd like to be, serving hundreds, if not thousands of people a month. And I'd like to be on a boat. I'm a big boater, somewhere in the Caribbean or South Florida, where I'm bringing people on, 2 or 3 couples at a time, and doing these massive transformations in their relationships and health and personal life and business on the boat over like a 3 or 4 day period.
Love it, man. Brad, appreciate your time today. Guys, if you didn't get anything out of today's interview, I think that probably says you need this more than anything. I think there's a certain level of where we roll our eyes at this kind of conversation, and it's more and more apparent in 2023. The reason why we do it is because we're not open enough to have these types of conversations. We need to have these conversations. We need to be open about where we are. And we need people like Brad out there helping more and more people. So share the message. Leave us a 5-star review. If you watch this on YouTube, make sure you give us a like and share this to someone that you might need this interview. You're not going to hurt their feelings. And like we said, don't worry about them judging you. Okay. Appreciate you, Brad.
Thank you. Loved it.